Ever since I got the photography bug as a late teenager, I'd always eyed off the Bay of Fires as a dream place to visit and shoot. I remember seeing the orange rocks contrasting with the turquoise waters in photography magazines in the late 90s and thinking, that's where I would love to take a landscape photo. Well, it took me a long while to finally get down to Tasmania and realise my dream, but when I did, it was more than I could have ever hoped for. In this video, I will take you on my 3-day photography journey to eventually getting my hero shot of the Bay of Fires. You'll see all the lead-up shots to me figuring out how to finally come away with one of my favourite landscape photos and favourite experiences. I was in Tasmania shooting for 6 tourism and accommodation outlets, and lucky for me, one of them was just based a 20-minute drive from the famous Binnalong Bay, which is the home to the Bay of Fires in Tassie. The first day we arrived, we were greeted with clear blue skies and reasonably warm weather for Tasmania. I found out later it was only 19 degrees Celsius, but 19 when it's sunny and no wind feels more like 25 because the sun is so harsh down there. The water temperature is a different story, however. Pretty sure that was hovering around 12 or 13 degree mark, and it was late spring. When we rolled into the far end of the Bay of Fires, I knew straight away it was worth the wait. I could see how I could have a ton of fun with my camera around these parts. The hardest decision was how I was going to actually shoot it. Because we had commitments with our holiday park job, I only had a few hours in the mid-afternoon light on the first day to get my shots. So I tried to fit it all in. I ran around with my tripod, my wide lens, trying to capture landscape images. The water looked amazing. The shape of the boulders was gorgeous. And it was one of the first sunny days we'd had on our entire Tasmanian trip so far. The rich orange rocks against the turquoise water is really what I wanted. But this end of the bay didn't really have a lot of the orange rocks. So I first tried my luck around the shoreline with ultra long exposures and stitched panoramas. I used a tripod and a wide angle lens and this 10-stop neutral density filter to achieve these super long daytime exposures. Without this very dark filter, getting the shots like this on a bright sunny day is almost impossible, or is impossible. These images were all taken with the shutter speed open for around 20 seconds. I sort of liked these landscape photos, but that clear water had me frothing to get my camera actually into the water. So I quickly loaded up my water housing and put on an extra thick 4 to 5 mil wetsuit and hit the water. I was aiming for split level shots to give that feeling of a snorkeling around and in between the rocks. This place had been photographed so many times, but not as many crews shoot it from the water, so I wanted to get a point of difference by using my water housing. And, you know, I'd take any excuse to get salty. So to start with, I got some talent in the shots because this was a part of the brief for the commercial job that I was shooting for. So some split levels of people rock hopping and photographing and enjoying the nice holiday weather is what I was trying to achieve here. But what I really had my eye on was getting these clean split level shots with the rocks and the vegetation. And these sort of pictures actually did fill my vision. They were definitely something I could use for the client and maybe add to my online gallery. Not really the hero shot that I had hoped for, but I was only a few hours into my shoot and I still had plenty of time. Once I had shot all I could see from the water, I got back into the car and drove further up into the Bay of Fires. The dirt road stretches up at least 10 to 15 k's and we started exploring every path to the beach. It was here we started to find the more vivid orange rocks that I was hoping for. This beach had really white sand, beautiful turquoise water, and that orange lichen covering the boulders. This was more like it. I hopped around these parts of the coastline for an hour or two, trying to find, an angle I liked. This out of focus foreground leading into the crisp breaking wave was my favourite from this section of the shoot. And while it was a good keeper and helped tell the story, it wasn't the hero that I really wanted to get. By this time it was getting later in the afternoon and I had talent lined up for a shoot back at the holiday park, so I had to finish up at the Bay of Fires for the day and head back to my commercial shoot. The next day I was mostly shooting in the holiday park, but I did get a chance to do a sunrise shoot at a beach named Beer Barrel Beach. It was such a gorgeous place, which apparently gets some good waves, but this day it was just clean and small, and it suited my landscape photo really well. Another few shots in the bag, but the hero shot of the Bay of Fires was still eluding me. That evening we went exploring down every track, and just on sunset that night we found my perfect composition. The light wasn't great that evening, the wind was up and the colour was flat, but I took this long exposure and got my compass out and saw that the sun would directly rise over this very scene in the morning. It was our last morning in the area, and I turned to Sharon and said, if I get a crack of sunrise tomorrow, I'm going to get the shot I've always dreamed of for all these years. Actually, it may be even better than what I dreamed of. I'd found the perfect composition, and now I just need a crazy sunrise sky to go with those beautiful orange rocks. After a few days of sussing out the area, I had my spot locked in. It was down an overgrown track, a little more out of the way than the obvious spots, and it had a perfect foreground of that lichen covered boulders. So some surf swirling around in the base of the rocks, and with that rocky outcrop a few hundred meters out to sea, it was a sweet looking composition. Now I just needed a sunrise. I went to sleep that night with my fingers crossed. The weather forecast didn't look great at all. It was predicted to be heavy rain. They were saying 10 to 20 mils every hour from 3 a.m. till lunchtime. But I set the alarm anyway at 4:30, and I jumped out of bed, and I couldn't hear any rain on the roof, so I drove the 20 minutes down the dirt track and then made my way through the overgrown walking track down to the spot. The clouds were starting to take colour, and the dream started to unfold right in front of me. There I was, alone on this coastline with an epic sunrise lighting up the most gorgeous rocks and colour filling my eyes, but the feeling was far more overwhelming than the visual. I set up my pre-planned composition. I used a tripod with a 17mm lens, a 0.9 graduated filter to keep the foreground from going too dark and keep the colour in the sky. And I also slipped in a 6-stop neutral density filter to get the long exposure of 151 seconds with the shutter open, which in turn introduced movement into the clouds and the water. This softness of the clouds and water contrasted against the rough texture of the orange boulders and gave it a better look than if I'd just shot at a regular shutter speed. It was so epic that a place that I'd wanted to shoot led me to this very morning, all by myself on the northeast coast of Tasmania, shooting this epic landscape scene that laid before me. Safe to say, I fell in love with photography a little more on that particular morning. After that colour went out of the sky, I took a few selfies just to give the human element to the scene. And the grey clouds actually did complement the orange rocks really well as well. And I did like this image, but the hero was shot and I was happy. A few minutes later, the sunrise colour completely faded and went dark grey and dumped 100mm of rain in the next 8 hours. I spent a lot of the day looking at this image with just a grateful smile. I hope this feeling of this magical morning somehow comes through in the image of the Bay of Fires. It certainly fueled my soul. If you enjoyed this insight into my photography, then it would be great if you liked or shared this video, or please subscribe to this channel to get weekly photography tutorials and behind the scenes of photo shoots. And if you really like this picture hanging in your house or office, the link to invest is below in the description. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all next week.